Welcome to our deep dive into the world of George Soros. We've got some fascinating sources here, Wikipedia articles, biographical excerpts, even some stuff from his own website. Clearly, someone wanted to get past the headlines and really understand this, well, complex guy.
Yeah, and he is complex. Financier, philanthropist, political lightning rod. It's really hard to put Soros in a box.
No kidding. I mean, where do we even start?
Well, I guess his story starts in Budapest,
Oh, okay.
in Hungary, back in 1930. Born György Schwartz into a non-observant Jewish family. And really, Soros's early life was anything but ordinary.
Yeah, that's true. You know, one of the biographical excerpts you sent, he actually calls his childhood home Jewish anti-Semitic. That's pretty striking. What do you make of that?
Well, it points to just the complicated relationship a lot of Hungarian Jews had with their identity back then. Just imagine navigating those complexities as a kid. And then you add in the growing threat of fascism in Europe
Oh, absolutely.
at the time.
And then, of course, the Nazi occupation of Hungary during World War II. I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for a young teenager.
Yeah, he was just 13
Wow.
when the Nazis invaded. And the sources detail how he survived using false identity papers. He even posed as the Christian godson of a Hungarian government official. Talk about a crash course in survival and deception.
Wow, yeah. It's really hard to grasp the level of fear and uncertainty he must have experienced. Did this experience influence his later actions?
Oh, there's definitely there's a clear connection between those early experiences and his later commitment to open societies. In fact, his father, Tivadar, he actually risked his own life to help other Hungarian Jews escape, during the war. And you can imagine those actions definitely had a profound impact on Soros's worldview.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like those early experiences planted the seeds for his later philanthropy and activism. But first, he had to build a career.
And what a career.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, after moving to England in 1947, he worked various jobs to support himself while attending the London School of Economics. The guy clearly had a hunger for knowledge and a strong work ethic.
He did, and then he moved to New York and very quickly climbed the ranks of the financial world, eventually founding his, well, now legendary hedge fund, Soros Fund Management, in 1970.
But, his success wasn't just, luck or anything. He developed a unique investment philosophy, which he calls reflexivity. I think you might find this particularly interesting given your own interest in the markets.
I am intrigued by this reflexivity idea. How would you explain it in simple terms?
Well, essentially, Soros believes that investor biases and perceptions can actually influence market movements. Imagine, a situation where investors become convinced that a certain stock is going to skyrocket. Now, their collective belief, even if it's not based on, solid fundamentals, can create a self-fulfilling prophecy, driving the price up.
Okay, so it's not just about crunching the numbers. You need to understand the psychology of the market.
Yeah.
And how emotions can create these boom-bust cycles.
Precisely. Soros was really a master at spotting these moments where perception and reality were out of sync. And he made billions capitalizing on those discrepancies.
Well, that brings to mind, of course, his famous 1992 short sale of the British pound.
Right.
The man who broke the Bank of England, as they call him.
Yeah, he bet against the British pound. He predicted that the UK couldn't maintain its currency pegged to the European exchange rate mechanism. And you know what? He was right. When the UK was forced to devalue the pound, Soros made, it's reported, $1 billion in profit.
Now, I have to ask, did he just see, the UK's economic weaknesses, or did he actually help to create the crisis by betting against the pound? Some sources even suggest that, his actions may have accelerated the devaluation.
Yeah, that's the heart of the debate around Soros's investment strategy.
Yeah.
Was he simply a brilliant analyst who recognized an inevitable trend? Or did his actions influence the outcome? I mean, it's a question that still sparks controversy.
It's kind of wild, right? That 1992 trade really cemented his rep as a financial, titan, I guess. But it's fascinating to me, as his wealth grows, so does his involvement in politics, philanthropy, mainly through his Open Society foundations.
It's like he felt almost like a responsibility to use his fortune to impact the world, beyond just the markets. And he clearly hasn't been shy about expressing those views, putting his money behind the causes that he believes in, right?
Yeah. His support for, progressive causes globally, from promoting democracy in Eastern Europe to funding criminal justice reform right here in the U.S., has been massive. What do the sources say, though, about, the effectiveness of his philanthropy? Has he actually moved the needle on these issues?
Well, that's a tough one, right? There are definitely different perspectives on that. Some people argue that his funding has been instrumental in supporting positive change, particularly in those countries transitioning to democracy. But others are, well, they're a little more critical, questioning whether his approach is truly effective or if it even, sometimes creates unintended consequences.
I see some sources highlight his role in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. He was funding dissident groups, promoting open societies, all behind the Iron Curtain back in the late 70s.
Yeah, I mean, he saw firsthand the oppressive nature of those regimes and believed that supporting individuals, organizations fighting for freedom, that was essential. It's actually a period of his life that's often overshadowed by his financial exploits, but it's, I think, incredibly important to understanding his motivations for sure.
It's so interesting how those early experiences, under Nazi occupation, seem to have really, deeply informed his belief in the importance of those open societies. He's almost like he's dedicating his life to fighting against the kind of oppression he witnessed firsthand as a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And that commitment to open societies, well, it extends to his work in the U.S. as well, of course.
Yeah.
He's been a major donor to democratic causes and has funded various initiatives, including those focused on criminal justice reform.
His support for progressive district attorney candidates, that's generated a lot of controversy, though, right?
Oh, it definitely has. Some argue that his funding has actually contributed to a rise in crime by supporting DAs who are perceived as being soft on criminals. Others contend that these DAs are simply trying to address the systemic injustices within the criminal justice system. It's a really highly charged debate. And, both sides, they point to data and statistics to support their claims.
This is where things get tricky. How do we, as readers and listeners, how do we sift through all these conflicting narratives and form our own opinions? What stands out to you as, I don't know, particularly noteworthy in the sources you provided?
Well, one thing that struck me was just how often Soros's critics resort to, personal attacks and conspiracy theories, rather than actually engaging with his ideas directly. It almost seems that for some, he's become this symbol of everything they oppose. And they're less interested in nuanced debate than in just demonizing him, frankly.
We touched on it earlier, but the conspiracy theories surrounding Soros are, well, they're really something else. How does a guy who's donated billions to humanitarian causes, how does he become, portrayed as this puppet master pulling the strings of global events?
It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon,
Yeah.
I think it speaks to just the power of fear and the need to find simple explanations for complex problems. It's easier to just blame a single powerful individual than to actually try and grapple with the systemic issues that contribute to things like inequality, political instability, and social unrest.
And then, unfortunately, some of these conspiracy theories, they've even taken on a pretty distinctly anti-Semitic tone.
Well, sadly, yeah, that's a recurring theme. He's been accused of being part of a global Jewish conspiracy, manipulating financial markets, controlling the media, undermining national sovereignty. These are dangerous tropes, and frankly, they have no basis in reality.
It seems the more successful and the more influential he becomes, the more he seems to attract these kinds of attacks. It's a reminder that philanthropy and political activism, even when it's well-intentioned, it can still make you a target.
And it really raises some important questions about the role of wealth and power in a democratic society, right? I mean, should individuals with, vast fortunes be able to actually influence political outcomes through their donations?
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line,
Yeah.
between legitimate activism and undue influence?
Yeah, those are questions definitely worth pondering. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, I do want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, which is his investment philosophy, that reflexivity. I find this concept so intriguing, and I'm sure our listener does too.
Yeah, it's definitely key to understanding how Soros thinks and operates. We should maybe delve a bit deeper into, the actual mechanics of reflexivity.
Yeah.
And how it's played out in his career.
Yeah, let's do that, because I'm still a little fuzzy on how his perception of the market can actually shape the market itself.
Okay, well, let's take the example of his short sale of the British pound. It wasn't just that he recognized the UK's economic vulnerabilities. He also understood that other investors would eventually catch on, and their collective actions, well, they would exacerbate the downward pressure on the pound.
So it's like a feedback loop. His bet against the pound, combined with the actions of others who, follow his lead, it created this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And this principle of reflexivity, it applies to more than just, financial markets.
Yeah.
Soros argues that it operates in all areas of human endeavor, from politics to social movements. Our beliefs and perceptions, they shape our actions. And those actions in turn, well, they shape the world around us.
That's a powerful idea. It suggests that we're not just like passive observers of these events, but active participants in shaping them.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that even the most, seemingly objective systems like financial markets, well, they're ultimately driven by human psychology.
Which brings us back to the core question, right? Is Soros a manipulative mastermind who just profits from chaos? Or is he simply a brilliant strategist who understands how to ride the waves of human perception?
Well, I think the answer is more nuanced than either of those extremes. He's undoubtedly a shrewd investor who's not afraid to take risks, for sure. But he's also, he's someone who genuinely believes that his actions can, make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Even if his methods are sometimes controversial.
It's almost like his life is this constant balancing act between his financial ambitions and his desire to use his wealth to promote, well, his vision of a more open, just, society.
Exactly. And that tension, I think, is what makes him such a compelling and enigmatic figure.
Man, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface here with this, this complex and controversial figure. So as we wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious, what do you see as like George Soros's enduring legacy?
Oh, that's a question worthy of its own deep dive, for sure. I think it's important to distinguish between the tangible and the intangible aspects of his legacy, really.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What falls under each category?
Well, I mean, tangibly, right? You have the billions he's donated, the institutions he's built, supported, the countless lives touched by his philanthropic efforts. That's a concrete record. It's tough to argue with.
We're talking universities, human rights organizations, initiatives spanning public health to criminal justice reform. I mean, it's a global impact, to say the least.
Exactly. And it's crucial to note that much of his giving, it targets systemic change, right? Not just those surface level solutions.
Yeah.
He's aiming to actually shift the underlying dynamics of power and opportunity.
And that's where his open society concept comes in, right? This idea that democratic principles, transparency, and individual rights, those are the real cornerstones of progress.
Yeah, that's really the bedrock of his philosophy. He believes that closed societies, whether they're authoritarian regimes or systems that are just kind of rigged to benefit the elite, well, they just stifle innovation, right?
Right.
And ultimately they harm everyone. And he's really leveraging his wealth to kind of push back against that, to level the playing field in a sense.
But then there's that intangible side, the ideas he's championed, the values he's promoted, and of course the controversies that have followed him, pretty relentlessly.
Yeah, it's impossible to really separate those elements, right? I mean, his financial success, that provided him with a platform, sure, but it's his willingness to use that platform to actually speak out on those political and social issues. That's what made him such a polarizing figure.
He's been both celebrated and demonized, really, for his outspokenness, particularly when he's, criticizing U.S. foreign policy or challenging the influence of, powerful interests.
He really doesn't shy away from confronting those in power, which can be both, admirable and deeply threatening to those on the receiving end. And as we've discussed, this has made him a prime target for those who just want to discredit him, often through those smear campaigns, conspiracy theories, all that.
It's striking to me that even his staunchest critics often acknowledge his intellect and his ability to grasp, the big picture, even if they vehemently disagree with his conclusions. What do you think it is about his approach that generates such intense reactions?
I think it's his willingness to challenge the status quo, really, to disrupt conventional thinking, to expose what he sees as, hypocrisy or injustice. He's not afraid to poke the bear, so to speak, right? And that makes him a threat to those who benefit from the existing power structures.
He almost seems to embrace being a contrarian, pushing people to, think critically, confront those uncomfortable truths. This brings me to a question I've been kind of pondering throughout our deep dive, which is, what do you think is the most significant question that his life story raises?
That's a great question. For me, it's the question of what responsibility a company's immense wealth, does it create an obligation to try and shape the world, according to your own vision? Or uh, is it better to just stay out of the fray
Right.
and simply focus on, generating returns?
It's a question that resonates, I think, not just with billionaires, right? But with anyone who has resources and a platform, even on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
How do we use what we have to try to affect positive change without imposing our own values on others?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, and one that Soros himself hasn't always gotten right, but his life and his career, they force us to grapple with these fundamental questions, and that in itself is a legacy
Right.
that will endure long after the headlines fade away. Well said. So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to turn it back to you, the listener. What stood out to you the most, in this exploration of George Soros? Was it those audacious investment strategies, his role in the fall of communism, or his unwavering commitment to progressive causes? What resonated with you, and what left you questioning? We really encourage you to continue exploring these questions, to dig deeper into the sources that we've touched upon here, and to form your own conclusions. Because ultimately, the search for understanding, it's an ongoing journey, one we're all on together.
Couldn't agree more. We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's always more to uncover. We hope this deep dive has sparked some new insights and maybe even some lively debates. Who knows? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.